Hi, I'm Stanislav Pronin. Today I would like to address an issue which shouldn't really be a subject for debate at this point given our broad historic knowledge, but unfortunately it remains quite problematic for many string players, and that is the role of vibrato in Baroque and classical repertoire. I was recently talking to a friend who is a concertmaster of a major European orchestra. Now, when we spoke about auditions, he expressed that in his mind it would be safer to play Erbarme dich solo or Mozart concerto without vibrato, so entirely senza vibrato. Of course, if you're playing an audition or a competition, your objective essentially is to win, and I sort of understand his point. However, here's my problem with his statement. Logically speaking, if playing entirely without vibrato is the safe option, that leads me to believe that playing with vibrato or even poco vibrato is somehow dangerous. Now, I certainly don't imply anything life-threatening when I use the word dangerous. I simply mean something that is, let's say, taboo or stylistically incorrect. But the question is, should the application of vibrato in Baroque and classical repertoire truly be considered out of style? I have actually made the use of vibrato in Baroque and classical repertoire the subject of my master's thesis. Having done a tremendous amount of research on the subject, going all the way back to the essays and writings of C.P. Bach as well as his contemporaries, and then returning hundreds of years later to literature written by many renowned scholars in the field of musicology, I can tell you with great confidence that there was no such thing as senza vibrato in Baroque or classical periods. Now, was vibrato used differently in Baroque and classical repertoire versus the Romantic era? Absolutely. All of the respected and trusted sources of literature for the past 300 years indicate very clearly to us that vibrato was constantly used in Baroque and classical music as an ornament, particularly on the long notes. Having done an immense amount of research, I am not aware of a single source, including the most diligent of musicologists, who would dare to claim that Baroque or classical music was performed entirely without vibrato at any point in history. Anyone who would make such a claim is simply ignorant and lacks sufficient musical education. I've had numerous experiences where I was leading an orchestra and performing Mozart's opera arias. So the woodwinds are vibrating, business as usual. The singer is vibrating like crazy, and then the conductor tells the strings, guys, please, senza vibrato. And in many of these arias, the strings are actually doubling the voice. I am well aware, by the way, that the solo line of the singer in an aria should certainly be more prominent than that of the supporting cast, so to speak. However, having the entire string section play without vibrato is hardly the solution. Actually, it has almost become like a safety net for mediocrity. You know, for a bad musician or bad conductor to come to an orchestra and say, you know, I've heard somewhere that during the Baroque period they used to play without vibrato, so we should do that, and that makes me a knowledgeable and good musician. No, it doesn't. And you're completely and utterly wrong, both historically and musically. And this is not an opinion, by the way, this is a fact. Having said all of that, I'm actually very supportive of professional Baroque ensembles. You know, the ones that tune properly, play in tune, play period instruments and bows, using gut strings, and by the way, they use vibrato as well. These people successfully create a museum-like representation of what it was like to be at a concert, let's say, in the 17th or 18th centuries. For modern players, however, a lot of things have changed, and that's simply evolution. So many different musical styles and periods have gone by. We've had the Baroque period, then the classical, then romantic, and then the 20th century, which featured more variety in terms of musical styles and genre than ever before in music history. Aside from stylistic musical changes, string playing underwent a number of radical technical adjustments. For example, almost all string players went from using gut strings to metal or synthetic strings. Another huge game changer was the modern bow, invented by the great Francois Tourte. This new and revolutionary bow design provided string players with much more possibilities when it comes to virtuoso bow technique. It also enabled us to sustain long notes rather than releasing them, which is crucial to developing a musical phrase. I respect tradition very much, but I also think there is nothing wrong with technical progress. One of the greatest pianists of all time, as well as one of the biggest Bach experts, the Canadian Glenn Gould, had often defended the use of modern piano for the performance of Bach's works. Gould suggested that Bach cared about the overall structure of his works much more than about the timbre of the instruments on which his works were performed. He also emphasized that Bach was arguably the most innovative and progressive composer ever, way ahead of his time. Given all of that, it makes total sense that Bach would welcome the new and exciting possibilities that the modern piano would provide for his music. In the same way, I don't see any problem in incorporating vibrato, tasteful vibrato, in Baroque and classical music today. By tasteful, I mean that even in the music of Tchaikovsky and Brahms, you shouldn't have this insane vibrato that would distract us from the music. I would even go so far as to say that in romantic music, where we mostly use continuous vibrato, non-vibrato can be an even more essential tool in enhancing your color palette than in Baroque or classical music. That is because it's unexpected. For example, change from major key to a minor key, and suddenly you have senza vibrato. It's a beautiful color and I use it all the time. I also don't advocate the use of continuous heavy vibrato in classical and Baroque music. But there is one last and certainly not least factor to discuss, and that is acoustics. When you think about Baroque music, let's say specifically Bach, C major fugue for solo violin. This is a 4-voice double fugue for solo violin. It's insanity. For that time, even today, it's very, very difficult. Bach knew how to play violin, by the way, so you would think to yourself, well, what was he thinking? Well, let me ask you something. Where do you think his works in 1720s would most likely be performed? They would be performed in a church. So with the crazy resonant acoustic that the church provides in mind, even when one arpeggiates a 4-note chord with a Baroque bow, the bass note keeps sounding like a half an hour later. My point is that it simply wouldn't be possible today to physically recreate the same acoustic conditions in Carnegie Hall or any big auditorium that holds 2, 3, 4, 5,000 people. Therefore, our instruments and bows had to evolve. They had to undergo certain adjustments throughout the years to accommodate these huge spaces. So you might ask, well, what does that have to do with vibrato? As you are probably well aware, our sound is created simply by the vibrations of our strings. Very simple and straightforward principles of the physics of sound indicate very clearly that vibrato largely enhances the acoustic properties of our sound. Therefore, we know for a fact that vibrato is not simply an embellishment. It actually enhances the quality of our sound as well as increases projection in the whole. When someone buys tickets to your concert, particularly a non-musician, they don't really care about the theory and historical background of performance practices that you're executing on stage. They just want to hear a great performance. So whether you're playing Mozart, Bach, Brahms or Tchaikovsky, if someone comes to your concert and they cannot hear you past 10th row, that's probably not a very good thing. This doesn't mean at all that you have to play everything forte and with a lot of vibrato. We don't have to go to extremes here. It's all a matter of common sense. For example, if you're playing Bach chaconne in a boomy church somewhere where you hardly need to vibrate to make the violin resonate properly, of course you don't need so much vibrato. On the other hand, if you play chaconne in the big hall of Berlin Philharmonie, for example, you're going to have to vibrate more because you have to adjust to the circumstances. In conclusion, I would like to say the following. First of all, a lot of things happened 300 years ago, both very good and very bad. And not all of the things that are part of our history should immediately become a tradition or a rule. Please don't get me wrong, I don't think that we should disrespect our past or our traditions, but we should learn to embrace positive progress. And finally, please always remember that the quality and beauty of your playing are always more important than dry theoretical knowledge. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe below. I will continue to post many more informative videos that will hopefully improve your lives as well as your playing. Until next time, take care and as always, stay tuned.